You see our young apprentice youth pastor, he's starting to grow a little bit of a beard. It's a great way of winning brownie points with your supervisor. Colton's already on board. He's got it, so, there you go. The one whom the pastor likes best. No, I'm just kidding. That's how we roll up here during the week. No, I'm just teasing. I'm not saying it's wet in Texas, but I saw a guy building a huge boat and two animals walk down my street. No, while we joke about the rain, let's also remember those who tragically have been victims of it as well. So, this morning, we're in the book of Exodus, chapter 3. Chapter 3, but we still have verses in chapter 2. I can go and cover those if you'd like. Now, if you need me to preach about Moses meeting his wife, I can do that. I figured I'd move ahead to Moses meeting God. So, Exodus chapter 3. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10. Exodus chapter 3. Now Moses was keeping flocks for his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. And he led his flocks to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he had turned aside, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for this place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now behold, the cry of my people Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. All right. Again, in the section that we jumped, Moses goes to Midian. He sits on the wall. He chases off some ruffians and some other shepherds. He catches the eye of Jethro's daughter. They get married. They have a kid. You're now caught up. Just in case you didn't want to read it, I suggest reading it. It's helpful. He now is a shepherd. And one day he decides to take his sheep westward to the edge of the wilderness. Another way of looking at that from the Hebrew is called the Negev. It's the land essentially between what we would, I guess, call now the Sinai Peninsula, if you were to look on a map. That's kind of the region that he's in. And as he's going along, all of a sudden, he sees a bush that burns. Let's read the text and see exactly how he saw that. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in the midst of the bush. And he looked at the bush, and it burned, not yet consumed. And Moses said, I'll turn aside to see this great sight. Why the bush? That would be a typical response, would it not? If you were driving down, 195 going to Austin, and all of a sudden you see a mesquite tree on fire, yet it's not burning, and the grass around it's not burning. I don't know how many of you would get out and take a selfie with it. For those of you who are older, a selfie is when you take your camera and you hold it like this, and it's usually a great opportunity for you to photobomb, which is when someone else jumps into the photo. I photobomb a lot of photos. Most folks today would take a selfie with something like that. Look what I just saw. This is stinking awesome. And they post it all over Facebook. Because I think that's really the only thing that goes on Facebook. But notice the phraseology that shows up. You have this individual appear, the angel of the Lord. Notice the phraseology is different than an angel of the Lord. It is the code in the Old Testament for a manifestation of a member of the Godhead. Typically, it's utilized of Christ. Usually it's a physical representation of Jesus Christ within the Old Testament. We would call this category a Christophany in theological terminology. Here, though, it seems to be more of a representation of whom? The Son or the Father? It's the Father. I am the God of your fathers, who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is God the Father appearing in the bush to talk to Moses. You say, well, what does it matter? What does it matter? Well, it's important to ascribe theologically and accurately which member of the triune God is doing the addressing here. Let me ask you a question. If I took the first 3 letters out of your name and began to call you that for the rest of your life, would it matter to you? I mean, would you be offended if I did that? Yet somehow we look at that and go, that doesn't offend God, it doesn't matter. We're going to see here in a minute where the shoes you're wearing, in this instance, matters. And the sand that you're upon matters. See, we take a callous approach to what matters to God because it doesn't matter to us. And therefore, since it matters not to us, it matters not to God. And that kind of logic leads to sin. So what you have here is you have a bush in which God the Father is present therein, and Moses sees it and he goes, hey, I think I'll check that dude out. Because you know, the life of a shepherd is oh so interesting. You get to wake up every day and follow a big brown stink across a big flat brown. Doesn't require a great deal of skill to be a shepherd. I mean, I was a machinist for 9 years. That job requires an infinite amount of skill. If you're a tradesman, those jobs require an infinite amount of skill. To be a shepherd, you have to do this. One, two, three. Okay. You have to be able to count past 10 and look for threats. Other than that, it's not really a technical job. So here he is as a shepherd watching sheep. He sees something that catches his eye. He goes and looks, and behold, he enters and has an encounter with God the Father. Now, where is this all taking place at? It's taking place at the Mount of Horeb. You say, so what? Mount of Horeb goes by many names in the Old Testament. The Mount of Sinai. The mountain of God, as it's mentioned here in the text. Give you a couple others. I had to walk away. Let's see here. Mount of Paran, Mount of Sirah. It goes by a lot of names. And this mountain plays a very pivotal role, especially in the Exodus. This is the place where Moses gets his command to go to Egypt. This is the place where God gives Moses the law. And this is the place where God tells Moses to strike the rock and the water appears. This is also, the last reference of it, is when Elisha flees the prophets, or actually, not the prophets of Baal because he's killed them, the Queen Jezebel, and he goes there. And here's a great secret about Mount Horeb. I'm going to tell you exactly where it is. You want to know where it's at? We don't know. After Elijah, I guess apparently they lost the map on how to get there. We can kind of surmise which ones they are by certain archaeological formations, but we don't know. But in the story of the Exodus, this is where the law is going to be given, this is one of the miracles that's going to be given, and this is where the burning bush incident occurs. Now, one of the great things about the burning bush incident is how fast people seem to want to discount it. Some of the theories behind the burning bush is, well, what Moses saw was the, that natural occurring phenomenon called St. Elmo's fire, in which you have this kind of chemical reaction within the air and plants and things look like they're on fire. My favorite, too, was when Moses turned to look, he actually saw the bush as the sun was setting. And the burning brightness of the sun through the bush made the bush appear as though the bush was on fire, yet it wasn't, therefore it was burning, yet not consumed. And then my best one that I really like is what Moses happened to see was not the bush burning, but Bedouins who had built an overly aggressive campfire where they were staying. And Moses, when he looked to the bush, saw the fire and the bush and thought the two were the same. Again, you see where you take the miraculous of what God is doing and you treat it very commonly. Science loves, and not just science, but atheists look at this and go, oh, well, this is easily explained away because surely it can't be miraculous. Surely it has no real meaning. Surely there's God not there within the bush who's about ready to have a conversation with Moses about what he wants Moses to do. Surely these things don't happen. Why? Well, because it's not important on who's in the bush. Because it's really irrelevant whether or not it's the Father or the Son. And see where that traces back to where we look at the bush and how we look at the importance of who is there. Clearly, it's not God. Well, the problem is, the miracle itself is not that the bush was burning and not consumed, but that God spoke to Moses from the bush. When the Lord saw that Moses had turned aside, he called out to him and he said, Moses, Moses. This is in the emphatic, so it's more like, Moses, Moses. Kind of like when your mom calls you. He got a Moses. I don't know what his middle name was. I got an Ashley Payne. I really knew at that point it was either go for broke or stop because the beating was going to happen anyway. Like many of you, I went for broke. So and Moses said, here I am. Notice what God says. Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place in which you are standing is holy ground. Now, it's amazing. A lot of times we look at this and we go, well, the ground itself was holy. Well, what made it holy? I mean, I've been to the desert. I've seen sand. I can guarantee you there's very little difference between the sand where he was told to take his sandals off and the sand in which he was on with his sandals on. It was sand. It's just sand. Conversely, you take this within the church today, there's very little difference primarily between carpet here and the carpet at my house, except for mine's white and shows stains. And, it's carpet. Chairs, there's no distinction. What changed the sand from being normal sand to being holy sand? It's the presence of the Almighty God. See, what happens is, what changed the situation was not the bush being on fire, was not the fact that the sand was special. God, when he showed up and brought in special sand and put it down and said, this is God's sand. And notice that he doesn't give a time or space for when he tells Moses to take his shoes off. How far did the holy sand go out, Moses? 10 feet, 10 inches, 10 yards, 10 kilometers, 10 miles? You are going to engage in a conversation with Almighty God. The ground upon which you are standing is holy. Take your shoes off. In the ancient Near Eastern world, to remove your sandals when you enter into a place was a sign of reverence and a sign of dedication to the one who is talking. It's really practiced more amongst your Muslim faith within the regions today. Not so much among your Christians and your Jews, but it used to be a very common tradition. This ground is holy. Why? Because that is where the presence of the Almighty is. Let us look at our lives for just a moment. When was the last time you treated the very ground that you were on as holy ground? Because guess who indwells within you? The third person of the triune God. When was the last time when you entered into the house of the Lord that you treated it as though it was the house of the Lord, and before you came in, you left your petty disputes, your unconfessed sin, all these things that you carry throughout the week, and you entered into the Lord with a commonplace practice of either one of two things. Those things during the week matter not, or God is bound to forgive me because God forgives. And you come to have an interaction in God's house, yet you treat it as common and yet not holy. I catch myself doing this at times. Brother Steve Thompson one day saw me walking in, and I had this if you ever see me walking with kind of like a very intense look, I'm not angry, I'm walking thinking at the same time, and usually when I think, I get this very intense look. And my thinking had nothing to do with what I was about ready to do for church service. And yet, when he asked me that, I realized that my thinking was in the wrong place. It wasn't an evil thinking. I wasn't plotting the overthrow of the world. I wasn't plotting how to become the third-party candidate for the presidency to where I could end up ruling the nation. I was thinking about other things. And yet, as I came into God's house, my thinking was not about the encounter I'm going to have with God and God's people, but some other trivial matter that I had elevated to a primary point of interest. But really, what happens is we look at this and go, well, this is just a building. It's 4 walls and carpet. You're right. It is. And in many other cases, throughout the week, it is no different than any other building. But this is where we come to worship the one true God. But let's boil it down a little bit further. When was the last time you treated your home as a holy place and had holy conversations and had holy activities? Or do you treat that place as common because, well, it's not church? Again, who are you indwelled with? The third person of the triune God. And His presence is there with you wherever you go. When was the last time within conversations amongst brothers that we treated those as holy conversations? And again, folks, I'm as guilty of as anyone else because I'm just as human as any of you. But when was the last time we contemplated and thought about the ground in which we are upon, wherever we are, because we are in a constant interaction with God, is a holy place, and treat it as such? Or do we treat it as common because it's not that big a deal? Because God doesn't mean that much. Because it doesn't matter what I call Him. And it doesn't matter what I ascribe to His nature. Do you see how easy it is to shift from things that are holy to things that are common based upon what's important to us? Moses, this is holy ground. There's no difference between the sand that the bush is on and the sand that Moses is upon. What makes the ground holy is who is there and who is having the interaction with Moses. There's no difference between the carpet in his house, in this building, and the carpet at my house. What makes the difference is what we are here to do and who we claim we are here to have an encounter with and worship. When was the last time we contemplated that? As I thought about this during the week, I thought about this at my own house and said, wow, I'm just as guilty as anyone else would be. It spurred me to thinking about how to make the house less a common place. Moses, this ground is holy. This ground is set aside. This ground is set aside for an interaction with you and I, and you will remove your shoes. And notice what Moses says after God introduces Himself. I am the God of your father, Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. God does not introduce Himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because Moses does not know who He is. He introduces Himself in this way, and to introduce the fact that God is the covenant-keeping God with whom He's made the covenant with Abraham. This is throughout the Old Testament. You see God introducing Himself, or not really introducing Himself, but addressing Himself in this way. And it's not that the people don't know who God is. It is a constant reference back to who He is in regard to who they are, to whom we are. Moses, I'm not the God of Pharaoh. I'm the God of your fathers. I am the God of Abraham, of whom I've made a covenant with, and of whom, as we saw in Genesis chapter 15, has said that the children of Israel will wander in a land that is not theirs. They'll be slaves. They'll be oppressed. I will punish the oppressor, and you will leave with their wealth And he gives a timeline. Well, look at that. I am a covenant-keeping God with my people. Moses. I am the God who sat with Abraham. I'm the God that gave Abraham Isaac. I'm the God of your forefathers. I'm the God that sent Joseph into Egypt. And I'm the God who's about ready to deliver them out. Notice he doesn't take a common approach to who he is. He gives himself these titles by which Moses' response is not going, "Sup? Glad you introduced yourself. I'm Moses. I used to be in Pharaoh's house, but now I'm on the backside of the desert. Sup, homie?" He doesn't do that. Notice this Moses' response. Not only does he take the sandals off his feet, but then he hides his face because he is poignantly aware of whom he is addressing. We love the passages in the Bible that talk about boldly becoming before the Father, but yet we ignore the passages that talk about humbly coming before Him, and we emphasize some over the others, and there's times for both. But unfortunately, a lot of times we ignore those because, well, God told us to come boldly. He did. He's also told you to walk humbly before your God. Well, we don't like those verses. Yeah, I know. I don't like the one about taxes either, but I still pay them. It's holy ground, Moses, and now I'm going to give you a holy mission. I have seen the affliction of my people. What we're going to talk about here is this is what we call anthropomorphic language. It is ascribing to a non-physical being physical traits. It is explaining what God does in time with temporal style language because God is not a temporal being. And so what the Old Testament writers do is they use language like God has seen, or their prayers have come up to His ears, or God has come down, because that's how we travel. I have yet to figure out how you can go north and go down. But apparently for some folks in the South, I'm going to go down to Michigan. Apparently that's an up, but hey. Or I'm going to the Walmarts. That one really grinds me. I'm going to the Walmarts. It's not possessive, and it's not plural. And you can only go to one at a time. So you are going to Walmart. There's my rant. We look at this and we ascribe to God language of physicality of which He does not possess. It's not that God was in heaven going, "Whoa, my children they're in Egypt. And dude, they're slaves. Who's been oppressing them?" No, why? Because we know from Genesis chapter 15 that He's already said that this is going to occur. And He says to Abraham, "Know for certain this will happen." So we know that it must come to pass. So He's not sitting up there going, "Whoa, how'd that happen? Smack, I got to get somebody over there." And yet that's how we approach God, and because the language is how we ascribe to Him these natures. The fact of the matter is, He hears the cry of His people, but in Genesis chapter 15, there was a caveat about what was going to accelerate that timeline, what was going to be the starting point for the timeline of deliverance. And what was it? It was the sins of the Amorites are not yet complete. We see now that the sins of the Amorites have become complete, because we're going to address that here. And so now at the prescribed time, God comes to a man and says, "I have heard my people's cry. I have heard my people's lament. I have heard and seen their suffering. and now I'm going to bring about their deliverance. Several things that you see from this passage. First of all, you have a God who's intimately aware of the pain and anguish of his people. Not people universal. A lot of people go, well, he's aware of their universal hurt. Funny, he doesn't just hear the universal, but yet he's talking to an individual about it. And then he's going to send an individual to bring about deliverance for the totality of the people. He doesn't hear your prayers like in Bruce Almighty, where the main character is just like overwhelmed and he can't stop all the prayers coming in. It's driving him insane. Somehow within the Godhead, he is capable of hearing every one of our prayers and every one of our hurts and every one of our concerns, and yet be able to focus directly the attention necessary for all those to be heard and all those to be recorded and all those to be understood. How he does that, I'm not a good enough theologian to really chase that through the rabbit hole. I am poignantly aware of the suffering of my people because I'm the one that sent them there. I'm poignantly aware of what is going on within their lives because I am the God who said to Abraham, they are going to go. And I am the God who fulfills his promise by saying, I will bring them out. The God in whom you serve, the God in whom you are involved with today, is a God who is not totally unaware of your suffering and of your problems and of the situations within your life. And yet when we pray to him as though we are informing him of the great travesty within our life. Lord, and just in case you didn't know, do you not see how badly I hurt? Yeah, I know exactly how bad you were hurt. Why don't you do anything? Because I've set a time. I have a plan. And when that plan is complete, see, we don't like those answers. We want instantaneous relief. Go watch a commercial that talks about pain relievers. How fast do we want pain to be gone? Instant relieving. When was that? The one that Johnny Bench advertises for. Blue Star ointment, whatever it is, I don't know. I forget. But we want instant relief, and yet God is not an instant relief God. He's got a plan for your and our lives, and sometimes it's in the midst of the suffering. Why? Because here's the thing. Just look at Moses' life. Was Moses, when we looked last week, ready to be the deliverer of the children of Israel? He thought he was. He thought he was going to lead a rebellion by killing an Egyptian, of which I don't quite fully understand the logic behind that. That's like saying I'm going to be president by assassinating everybody in Washington. It just doesn't work that way. The logic doesn't follow. Notice that Moses has to go into the wilderness for a while. So not only are the people in Egypt suffering, but Moses goes from being the guy who he believes has been called by God to deliver Israel to being a nobody in the middle of nowhere doing a job no one wants to do. Seriously, of all the career choices you could have in the world, following a big brown stink over a big brown flat area is not one where I go, sign me up. Does it come with a hat and a cane? Because, man, I am so on it. For those of you who have never had any real interaction with large amounts of sheep, I've had several. I will not regale you with the one from Iraq because that's just... But one morning I was running in Italy, and yes, to dispel the fact that I used to run. I did used to run. I don't anymore, unless I'm chasing a barbecue truck downhill. Anyhow, I was running one morning and I was doing pretty good. I was making some good time. And after a while you start breathing really hard and all of a sudden the local shepherd comes down the road because they use the roads to move sheep over there if you haven't noticed that. And if you hit them, you're in big trouble. Anyhow, so they're moving the sheep and all of a sudden as they come by, I'm running. I think I can survive a chemical weapons attack because I know what it's like to live and not be able to breathe. The smell is just... unreal. And I say that in the kindest of terms. It is unreal. The stench. It is not the job where you go, I cannot wait to smell like a sheep. When I was in Iraq, apparently that was a hit cologne, ode to sheep. But I couldn't. So he is a nobody now. Think about it. He was in Pharaoh's house. He is not. He's a nobody in the middle of nowhere. The Negev, the Sinai Peninsula, is a big open nothing. The only people that are there, and I don't know if they're there anymore, is a brigade from the 82nd Airborne that goes over there to make sure Israel and Egypt don't start going to blows again. Other than that, there's nothing out there. It's a big, flat, brown nothing. He's a nobody in nowhere doing a job no one wants to do, but yet is going to be given a task by which is going to elevate him to one of the greatest leaders Israel has, and one by which we will see referenced in the New Testament. But he had to go out into that spot. He had to suffer off of what his ordinary mission would be. See, the timeline for God, if you look at this, if you read Acts says it's another 40 years. So he wanders for 40 more years in the Negev trying to figure out what God wants. Again, if this was God's plan, local tactical nuke, pow, Pharaoh is done, let my people go, I'm going to drop another one. Right? That's how we would handle it, right? I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians and to bring them up to a land, to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. If you go back to Genesis chapter 15, it talks about the Amorites, and they were at the time the largest of the Canaanite tribes. And so when Abraham is talking to God about this, or God more specifically is talking to Abraham about this, the time of the Amorites is not complete, but now the time is. I have come to deliver them because the point in which I said would be the inaugural stepping point is that these people's sin has reached the level which I have said, that's it. Now I'm coming to deliver my people out of Egypt, and I'm going to have you, Moses, do it. But not the way you want it. Notice when Moses wanted to do this 40 years earlier, God said no. And into the wilderness Moses goes. See, God has a plan by which he works. He has a timeline by which he makes things occur. And while we have opportunity to weave in and out of that timeline and do things that we like to do and try to help God out, the end result is that plan is unaltered. Otherwise, he is not the God of Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham, because in 15, he gives the plan. And he gives it with a statement of a surety. Know for certain, Abraham, this event will occur. Well, if it doesn't occur, then God's a liar. And within the first two books of the chapter, we can stop worshiping this guy because he's a lying God. Right? The time of these individuals has become complete. I've heard the cry of my people. I have seen their things. And all the things that I have set into motion are now come to a point, and I have chosen you, Moses. You have been in the backside of the world in your life. You are a nobody in the middle of nowhere doing a job no one wants to do, wondering if God is ever going to do anything great within your life, going, God, what is the plan you have for my life? And yet God has a plan in which he may be saying, just wait. Just wait. Moses followed a big brown stink for 40 years. So we skip all that when we read the Old Testament, or when we don't read the Old Testament. You see repeatedly amongst the patriarchs that they had to wait. Abraham was promised land he never got to own. But yet it was promised to him. He was promised that he would be a great nation of which he has never seen. Neither did Isaac. Neither has Jacob. But now here in the books of Exodus, a nation will come forth. 400 years, 400 to 800 years after the first command is given in Genesis 15, 400 years after the wandering begins. And we look at our lives and we go, what's God doing? Folks, if He's got 400-year time span for some plans, you may just simply be a part in that 400-year plan that when you get to heaven, you will see just how valuable you were in God's plan, and yet should stop going, what's God's point for me? It's almost like Jan and the Brady Bunch. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. See, Moses had to go into the desert to where he could be usable by God. A lot of times you have to go through these events so that you can be usable by God. And trying to speed things up is pointless, because there's a timeline by which things are in action. Notice 40 years earlier, Moses tried to speed things up, and God said, yeah, okay, guess what? Guess where you're going? We got an all-expense paid trip to a big brown stink for 40 years. I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. We read this in more of a permissive understanding. And that's one of the problems. And when I talked about this in one of the young adult classes this morning, is sometimes Hebrew does not translate well over into English. And a lot of times there's some very unique forms, there's some very unique verbiage, there's some very unique phraseology that is unique really to that language. And sometimes the verbal forms that they use, translators don't carry across the way they should. They bring across in more of a permissive understanding. We use the word may as, well, I may, or I may not, as though it's optional. I may wear brown slacks this morning, or tan. I know for you, you're all happy that I'm wearing slacks. I was wondering if you were asleep. I may go to Austin, or I may stay at home. See, we use that in more of a permissive way. In Hebrew, may is not used in a permissive tense. It's not used in a permissive sense. As a matter of fact, these verbs here are very unique, and they have imperatival force, but they have it in such a way that it is not, Moses, if you're willing to lead my people out, you've got the job. I've interviewed 7 different Moseses, and you're the lead candidate, and you may lead them out. When I was in the Army, I had a chaplain assistant that really didn't understand when an officer says, hey, will you go do something, that's not a command. He thought that I was asking him if he wanted to do that. And finally, Sergeant Major, because my office was directly across the hall from the Sergeant Major, which cut down on counseling, which I was okay with, but was also very enlightening because I learned how not to put words together because, well, he could, anyhow. And so I said, hey, will you go and get the Humvee and get it PMCS and bring it up to the battalion? Shouldn't you do that? If I got to do your job, soldier, I don't need you. Well, will you go do that? And he came up with all kinds of things. Finally, the Sergeant Major yelled out, hey, he's not asking you. He's politely telling you before he makes it an overt command. He had to be instructed that when an officer says, will you go do something, he's not asking if you possess the ability to do so, if you possess the inclination to do so. It's basically, go and do this. I'm being polite and nice. Kind of the same thing comes over here. This isn't, Moses, you may lead my people out. No, if you were to really get the emphasis behind the Hebrew, come! I have selected you, and you will lead out my people. That's the intensity and the force that's in the Hebrew. Why they don't bring it over into the English, I don't fully understand. And when I talk to these editors, if I ever get to, I'll ask them. But that's typically how most English translations roll with Hebrew in that. They translate it in a permissive sense. Moses is not being given the option of whether or not he would like to lead out God's people. This isn't an optional task for Moses. We go, well, I've thought about it. I kind of like following this big brown stink in the desert. It's easier. People won't try to kill me. And if we notice as we begin looking, I don't want to give it away because you won't come back next week. We will see where Moses comes up with excuse after excuse. And then we will see that Moses follows a single course of action. I mean, it's not the course of action of the excuse. Moses, come. I am sending you to Pharaoh, and you will bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. God has a plan and a purpose for all of us, and we sit and we wonder what God's plan is, And then when God comes to us and says, I want you to do this, our natural inclination is to go, oh, Hoss, you got the wrong guy. When I was a machinist, I believe the Lord calling me into ministry, and I went, I don't know what you're on, but you better come off of it because you got the wrong guy. I'm an introvert. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I don't read well. I hate public speaking. I talk with my hands. People really annoy me because I'm an introvert. Like I've said, my ideal safe space, my ideal happy place is an island with nobody else on it. And if you show up and ruin my happy spot, I'll probably shoot you. That's my happy place. I can vision myself there right now. Sorry. Anyhow. That's my idea of my happy place. And when God said, I want you to be a minister, you're like going, whoa, I only like dealing with my problems. Let alone everybody else's. You have the wrong guy. Seriously, that guy's a better choice. Yeah, I don't want that guy. See, we spend our lives wondering what God is going to do for us, and then all of a sudden when he says, I've got you, strap on your skates, get into the game, you go, whoa, no, wrong game. Listen to the height of that, almost arrogance. What's God going to do in my life? I want you to do this. Nope, nope, no. Moses, you're the man. And we'll see the excuses from Moses all next Sunday. Don't not show up, because then you'll be lost for the rest of the book of Exodus. So what? So what? When we develop a casual awareness of who we are with God, a callous awareness, does it really matter how I address God? Does it really matter whether or not I really study really hard and know what he wants, or really assign to him proper honor due his name? It's very easy for us to look at the ground that we are upon as very common, very impractical. Our relationships amongst the brethren are very easily then dismissed and swiped away because, well, does it really matter? Is it going to send me to hell? It's because we focus on whether or not it sends us to hell, whether or not it's a right relationship. And if all of our focus is on is whether or not it sends us to hell, then we've got a very small subsection of what the whole text preaches. Because there's more than just sending people to hell. There's a right relationship with how we live with one another. There's a right relationship with how we live with a holy God. It comes to the point where when Moses comes to speak to God, or God speak to Moses, Moses is told to take his sandals off, because the ground that he's about to walk upon is ground by which God's presence alone has made it holy. God's presence alone in your life has made you holy. Not something you did. Something He did for you. And yet, how do we then treat that very holy ground? We treat it very commonly. Look at our households and how we run them. Look at our money and how we spend it. Look at our TV and how we watch it. Look at the things in our lives that occupy our time and all those things. Is God getting the greatest and is He holy, or is He just commonplace, a thing you do, not a relationship you have? And then we wonder why God doesn't use us. Marcia, why God doesn't use me? And then when God calls us, we have had such a common relationship with Him that when He says, "You're it," our response is, "No way." Because we don't really follow whether or not the thing is holy. And the relationship is holy. Most of the times we get so wrapped up in if God is going to deliver. Is God really going to deliver me out of this problem? Is God going to really heal me of this sickness? Is God really going to get me out of this, even though I got myself into it? When is He going to get us out of it? Well, I really hope you have a timeline and a plan for when you get me out of this mess. How is He going to do it? This is so messed up beyond comprehension. How is He going to? He can't, and I know we've all said this, there's no way He can fix this mess. And that's where we get our mind wrapped up in. Instead of focusing upon this, God delivers. He delivers. He delivers on His promise that He makes with Abraham 400 plus years later. 80 years after Moses tried to help him out, 40 years after Moses tried to help him out. But God delivers. You don't serve a God who's off playing golf and then comes back and tries to fix the world. You serve a God who's intimately aware of who you are and desires an imminent and intimate relationship with you. And while at times you may suffer, He is poignantly aware of your suffering, and we lose sight with questions of if, when, and how, and not on He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, a covenant-keeping God with His people, and that He delivers in His own way, in His own time, by His own power. If you're here today and you haven't not a relationship with this covenant-keeping God, I'd like to sit and talk to you about the hope that I have, that I serve a God who can deliver me from the midst of any trial simply because of who He is. If you're here today and you've been coming for a while and you'd like to join the fellowship of Skyline Baptist Church, I'd love to sit and talk with you. I'll have my microphone turned off. It'll be a private conversation between me, you, and the Lord. As the praise band comes to lead us in our closing song, if you will please stand.